From LinkedIn News, I'm Jessi Hempel, and this is Hello Monday. It's our show about the changing nature of work and how that work is changing all of us. So last fall, I had this former hostage negotiator in the studio. We were talking about negotiation. It was a pretty awesome episode, and that's because the guest, you probably remember him, he was Chris Voss.
So I want to gather information about you. I want to be very curious about you. I want you to feel like I am actually intensely curious about you as a human being. Because the negotiation has begun. We're negotiating for trust. We're negotiating for a long-term relationship.
Chris's book is Never Split the Difference. It's become something of a Bible for people who want to get better at asking for what they want. And most importantly, at getting what they want. He's built this philosophy into a full consultancy. It's called the Black Swan Group. He trains leaders and teams to negotiate with less friction and better outcomes. And now their work has evolved into a new book. It's called Fight Less, Win More. And today in the studio, we have one of this book's authors, Jonathan Smith.
If you don't do low-stakes practice, you won't be able to do the high-stakes negotiation. You're going to fall back to whatever your training level is, and these are depreciable skills. If you're not practicing, they go away.
Jonathan is a business strategist, a negotiation instructor. He has spent years teaching people to listen in moments that matter. And listening, it's the skill that separates great salespeople from average ones. It's what distinguishes managers people trust from managers they endure. It's what keeps marriages intact. And if it were truly simple, we would all be better at it. Today, we're going to talk about why empathy isn't soft, why listening is a discipline, but maybe most importantly, we are going to learn how to fight less. And maybe, if we are lucky, how to win more. At work and well beyond. Here is Jonathan Smith.
The book is designed to be the missing manual for a book called Never Split the Difference.
We love Never Split the Difference.
And Never Split the Difference sold 5 million copies. And we keep getting this question when we go out and speak. How can I get better at these skills?
Right.
This book was designed for that.
Well, and these skills in particular center around one skill. That is a defining skill to the Never Split the Difference work. This idea of employing tactical empathy. Tactical empathy was a 2-word phrase that I never, ever heard before I read Split the Difference. So let's start there. What are we talking about?
Well, tactical empathy is that you have an intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain is telling you something. And then we verbalize that intuition.
Right.
And literally, it's like verbalized EQ is what we think of it as.
Isn't that just empathy?
But it's the fact that we're actually verbalizing it and sharing it with the other party and having them feel heard.
Right.
Because people are desperate to feel heard.
Why at this point do we need an instruction manual to do something that I think my grandma actually understood how to do intuitively?
Part of it is that we've lost a lot of the interpersonal relationships. Like we're on text, we're on phone. We think it's okay not to call people. We think it's okay just to email. And I think you can use these skills on email, but you have to just be really intentional about the relationship.
Can you use these skills on email? I mean, I hesitate to ask, but so much of what you're talking about, it's in-person conversation. Do these skills also work in more mediated forms?
They do. And if you really want them to work, it needs to be in person.
I want to step back a second. I want to think about our listener, okay? Our listener is someone who is faced every day in their lives with negotiations that they need to be having. Those negotiations range from the very large, I'm screwing up the courage to ask my boss to finally think about putting me up for a promotion to director at the end of the year, hypothetical, to the very small. I'm really, really, really annoyed with my colleague because she keeps putting her coffee on my desk and I get these coffee rings and it makes me so angry I can't even look at her, so I just don't, right? I want to think about how you use your framework to address everything from the big to the small. It begins with the central assumption that actually any hard conversation we have ahead of us is a negotiation. Am I right?
We say anytime I want or I need is in your head or your counterpart's head, you're in a negotiation. And I like the one about the coffee cup because it's low stakes practice. So you have to do low stakes practice to ultimately have high stakes confidence.
Let's move to an example that I actually journaled before we were together. I was thinking I was going to spend some time with you, and I thought, well, this is a good opportunity for me to review some things that have not worked so well for me in the past. And here was one that actually felt very high stakes. The show's 7 years old. The original producer it had was with us for the first season of it. I really liked her. She was great. She was so smart. She was really young. I trusted her with the entire show as we were launching it. It was just the two of us launching it together. And when she was on top of things, she was really, really good. But she let things slip. She made mistakes. They seemed kind of like careless mistakes. First time, I overlooked it. Second time, a mistake might be like the show was supposed to publish on Monday, but she didn't quite get it published, and it didn't publish until the Tuesday. I'd consider that a big mistake for a show that publishes on Monday. Second time it happens, I bring it up to her, and she promises it won't happen again. But these kinds of things happen over and over again. And finally, at the end of the first season, we just part ways. I never really bring it up with her. And I miss the opportunity to build on the working relationship and continue to take advantage of her creativity and our goodwill together, because I'm too stymied by the fact that we've had so many issues come up that haven't been addressed. How might I have done that differently?
So we would start with what we call an accusations audit.
Okay.
So an accusations audit, you're literally going to take the negative things that are in her head and you're going to verbalize them. So here's a couple examples. You probably think that I'm overly rigid. For example, about Monday versus Tuesday.
Yeah.
It may seem like I don't appreciate all the hard effort you've put in. So it's almost like emotion canceling. We're taking all those negative emotions off the table.
Right.
So now that's not even at play. And now if you're right, she's going to say, that's right. And if you're wrong, she's going to tell you you're wrong and correct you and say, oh, no, that's not the situation. Here's the actual situation. So now it gets you to the point where you can actually have a conversation because all those negative emotions have been taken off the table. And then you have, we call it trust-based influence at that point.
It's not lost on me that as you put these statements out in this accusation audit, and this is by design, they're all formulated so that my first response to them can be no. And in no, I am affirming you.
Mm-hmm. Those are no-oriented questions.
Okay, so a no-oriented question is a question that somebody can just begin by right off the bat saying no to. It's amazing how good it feels to say no and know that you heard my no and accept it. Why does that feel so good? Actually, it feels so good. And that really is a never split the difference rule, that idea that if you can begin with the no, then you unlock a yes.
Because you removed yourself as a threat. You're not threatening her and you're not selling her.
Yeah.
You're saying, it's your choice.
So you talk about the audit, right?
Accusations audit.
The accusations audit. And as you do that, I realize that I'm bringing to this my own style. And you actually have a framework for understanding one's style when it comes to negotiation. I wonder if you might share that with us.
Sure. So we have 3 types of negotiators. So we have an assertive negotiator, an analyst negotiator, and an accommodator negotiator.
Got it. Can you tell off the bat what kind of negotiator I am?
Probably an analyst.
Yeah, I think I'm an analyst. I say that with a raised eyebrow, but you do make the point that it doesn't really matter what kind of negotiator you are. It matters that you understand what kind of negotiator you are, right?
It matters that you understand, and then I would treat you differently potentially in a negotiation.
Say more.
So an analyst sometimes just needs more time to process.
Mm-hmm.
So if I just use dynamic silence and give you 15 seconds, some uncomfortable amount of time to process, you will feel much better understood because I'm not putting you under pressure to answer me while you're processing what your analyst brain needs to process about what's the next question or what have you.
Wait, you're using dynamic silence in this conversation, aren't you?
I have all the time. I can't help myself. I'm addicted.
Okay, so what is dynamic silence?
Dynamic silence is literally being quiet.
Yeah.
Because we're so used to, I made a request, and then when you didn't respond to me in 3 seconds, I'm going to like, oh, by the way, she wants to want to do something else, as opposed to just sitting here and waiting for you to respond.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like, why am I talking?
Yeah. Yeah. I, as a journalist, have spent 25 years cultivating the art of creating space for people to share important information with me, the kind of information that helps me more completely understand a story. And what I have discovered actually maps directly to what we're talking about in 2 ways. One, you can say difficult things to people. And if they are true, people will usually respect you for that. Even if they're immediately angry, the anger usually passes, and they'll respect you more for it. And 2, if you say nothing at all, they will tell you more. So the best question is a question that ends with a very long silence.
That's dynamic silence.
So walk us through your core 4.
So the core 4 are the foundational tools. So if you know nothing else, these are the 4 skills you'd want to use. So we start with labels. So a label to us, it starts with this. It seems like, it sounds like, it feels like, it looks like. That it seems like you're having a bad day.
Yep.
So it starts with that. What we're trying to label ideally is the latent dynamic.
Right.
Not the presenting dynamic. So the presenting dynamic would be like, your face is red and you're clearly angry. If I say you seem angry, that's not going to be helpful.
Right.
As opposed to, it seems like I've said something to disappoint you, or it seems like I said something to hurt you.
So basically, like, I see the situation. The situation is that you're angry. What I'm going to present to you is my interpretation of why we got to this situation.
That's the latent dynamic.
I might be right, I might be wrong. It doesn't matter, right?
It doesn't matter because the urge to correct is irresistible. If you get it wrong, they'll tell you.
Yeah.
And they'll tell you the truth when they do correct you.
Right.
Super interesting.
Is this part of how you move toward likability with someone, getting them to like you?
I think of it more as like getting them to feel heard.
Yeah.
Like they have a feeling that, oh my gosh, they really understand how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
So you can de-escalate a situation.
And so what do the core 4 unlock?
So it basically gets to the point where people feel heard by you. People feel like they're more likely to want to do a deal with you. So the first step is labels. The second step is mirrors.
Yeah.
So mirrors we say it's saying the last 3 to 5 words of something that someone said to you. A mirror would be the last 3 to 5 words. And an upward inflection. So upward inflection would be I'm asking a question. Downward inflection is, I acknowledge what you just said.
Acknowledging what you just said.
I acknowledge what you just said.
And we could become a funhouse of mirrors if we wanted to.
But I was just trying to show you what a mirror would look like. And then just the next one is dynamic silence, which we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
But just the idea of giving people space to think and respond.
Yeah.
And then the 4th skill, we call it summary.
Yeah.
And summary is all about what you've told me, not what you've heard.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a list of, we try to make it like 9 things. You would start it at the beginning of a negotiation, when you want to make an ask, when you want to assert yourself at the end of a negotiation. And it would literally be, so far you've told me, not I've heard.
Why that distinction?
Because I'm saying what you told me. I'm not saying this is what I heard and interpreted.
Yeah.
So it feels very different when I say, so far you've told me. And if I get it wrong, you're going to tell me, no, I didn't tell you that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But language matters.
Yep.
The language matters.
Do you think that we have become better or worse at the set of skills that you cover over the last 3 years as AI has evolved and become something that went from being something we heard about to being something we played with to being something that it is now the expectation that all knowledge workers use over the course of their day?
I think COVID's more problematic than AI. So, I think,
In terms of isolation and isolating people.
well, and then
Yeah.
and then the formative skills to communicate.
Yeah.
Like, so it starts there. And then what happens with AI, when used properly, people end up having better outcomes a lot of times. I mean, I've done 400 negotiations with AI at this point. So I love walking in, just like you would brief for an interview.
Yeah.
I use AI to brief for me for an interview. Yeah. So I can look at every single podcast you've been on, run it against, I've created a point of view, a GPT, and it will literally tell me what your worldview is so I can listen in the fifth level of listening. So it puts me in a position where hopefully I can stay present enough and stay on topic and talk about things that make you feel heard.
Yeah. You just drop in there, fifth level of listening. When you describe the 5 levels of listening, give them to us quickly.
Listening for the gist. I'm on my phone and you're talking to me and like I'm pretending I'm listening.
Yeah.
Listening to hijack. You're in a meeting and before you're even done, the other person's jumping on the table and taking the conversation to the right.
Sounds like every conversation I have with my wife when we're tired.
Yes, that's when you ran out of personality. Listening for logic. So this is the one that we can stay in or not triggered. To the best of your ability. So that's logically, why is this person saying this? There's a reason they're saying this. Listening for logic and emotion. So the combination of the two.
Yeah.
And then listening for their point of view. So the idea with point of view is you may not agree with their point of view, but can you acknowledge their point of view?
Yeah. It's a pretty powerful thing when you hear somebody acknowledge your point of view. What else do you have for me?
Oh, I have a lot.
Tips and tricks, man.
Tone.
Yeah.
So tone will get people to do things. Just your tone. So again, we have 3 tones and sometimes it gets confusing because the 3 tones are the same as the 3 types of negotiators.
Say more.
So there's a accommodator tone. That's like happy-go-lucky accommodator tone. There's which Chris calls the late night FM DJ voice. Mm-hmm. That's the analyst tone.
Slowing it down.
Talking about every single word. And then there's an assertive tone. Basically, you're screaming or you're raising your voice and pointing your finger.
Right.
And we say in a negotiation, 80% of the time you want to be in an accommodator tone. 20% of the time you want to be in a analyst tone. And we try to avoid using the assertive tone.
So assertive would suggest authority, but actually the real path to having authority in a negotiation is by leaving your assertive tone and maybe even your assertive approach on the table.
You can still be assertive, negotiator, because assertive is what they naturally go to when backed into the corner. So you're not going to change that. You're hardwired for that. Mm-hmm. And we found a third of the people are assertive, a third are analyst, and a third typically are accommodator. The issue is knowing how to modulate your tone. So that you naturally, even when you're triggered, when I'm like, I'm triggered, don't use the assertive tone.
What do you mean by triggered?
Get angry.
Yeah.
I want to scream. Can I stay in accommodator tone? I want to deliver a message. Now I should deliver the analyst tone because I want to make it really clear what I'm asking.
How do we get better at that? Because that actually is a pretty critical piece of this. That what you're asking for is for us to develop the self-regulation, to be able to identify the way that our emotion works within us and can work against us, and to throttle it. That's some grown-up skills right there.
So that's the reason we say to do low-stakes practice. Because if you don't do low-stakes practice, you won't be able to do the high-stakes negotiation.
Yeah.
So you're going to fall back to whatever your training level is, and these are depreciable skills. If you're not practicing, they go away.
Yeah.
And so I make it a game at this point. That's why I created the journal idea. Because, how do I make it ever present that I'm going to go use the skills?
Okay, so the journal idea. You You actually believe in, if we want to improve at this, journaling after discussions that are negotiation discussions to really reflect on what worked and when it didn't, why.
Yeah, I think that's how the adult learning model works. Adults learn by doing.
Yeah.
And now we have to be willing to do, and then we have to be courageous enough to reflect on what we did.
Yeah.
And then accept the fact that, like, if you got triggered and used an assertive tone and it didn't come off that well and that person's now upset with you, how do you do it better next time?
Yeah.
Then the other thing is you have to realize that a negotiation isn't necessarily a single point in time.
Yeah.
A lot of times a negotiation might take 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And you may have to go at it 3 or 4 times. The first conversation might not lead to all that breakthrough. It might need to be like, hey, let's just see if we want to go at this again, and then work it out over time.
Yeah.
And be patient. People aren't patient with negotiation.
What does it even mean to be patient with negotiation?
To me, it means not showing up and going like, I'm trying to achieve this result. But if you're on the path to having a better relationship, and you're on the path to having something that looks better and feels better, that's a win.
Well, if you want to put these skills to practice, what do you suggest? What can you leave us with?
Well, I would start with, the book is written so you can read a chapter at a time and learn the skills.
Yeah.
You have to be curious about using the skills and make a commitment. It's like learning a new language. The only way you can do this is through immersion.
That was Jonathan Smith, negotiation instructor and co-author of Fight Less, Win More. Check out the book. If you want to go deeper on this kind of work, go back into our archives and find that episode with Chris Foss from last fall. You will be glad you did. I'm Jessi Hempel, and this is Hello Monday. Thank you for joining us. I'll be right back here next week. See you then. Hello Monday is a production of LinkedIn News. The show is produced by Ava Ahmadbegi and Adam Yates. Sarah Storm is our senior producer. Sound design and engineering by Asaf Gedron. The show is mixed by Tim Boland. Our theme music was composed just for us by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. Michaela Greer is a friend of the show forever, as is Victoria Taylor. Kyle Ranson-Walsh is editor-at-large of editorial graphics. Dave Pond is head of production and creative operations. Courtney Coop is head of original programming. Dan Roth is the editor-in-chief of LinkedIn. I'm Jessi Hempel. This is Hello Monday. See you next week.